Hello, friend. Welcome, everyone, to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Mr. Robot, Season 4, Episode 7. It is called 407 Proxy Authentication Required. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. And I'm really going to emphasize it this time. Full spoilers for the episode. And this is one of these episodes where it kind of recontextualizes the entire show up until this point. So I'm going to make it very clear again. Full spoilers before you watch this.
I've been dodging spoilers all day because I was working a late shift tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't watch it until after. And it was kind of a different day than usual, so I was kind of on my phone a lot. And I'm scrolling through Reddit and I'm seeing things like, "Oh, this episode." I'm like, "Don't click on it. Whatever you do not accidentally click on that." And oh my god, I was genuinely worrying at some points that I was just going to accidentally tap something and see it.
This was a big, I mean, I didn't actually see any buzz about it. I watched it early enough, I watched it before I went to sleep. I watched it, yesterday. Not knowing anything, obviously expecting good things because it's Mr. Robot, not knowing,
But were you expecting, maybe a new best episode?
Oh, that's bold. That's bold to go straight there. But I was not expecting I guess because the type of episode this is, I kind of expected right at the end, as opposed to halfway through the season. Now, don't get me wrong, I can kind of see why it's halfway through the season. I can see a lot of development to come post this with, his relationship with Darlene, for example, and other things like that'll develop. And this is by no means an ending, but this is a game-changing episode that... Do you know what I love about this? And this is true of... And I'm not going to say what it is yet. We're going to go through this in order. I've got extensive notes. And it's funny, because you think, oh, it's all set in one apartment. Like, surely there's less notes than normal. No, I was so worried about missing a prominent line that I have written down so many freaking lines of dialogue that I have more notes than I've ever had. So... But this episode, like, it's such a game-changing episode that it completely upends everything that we've ever known. But what I love about it is that it's not actually that... Like, if you go back and look, right, because I was sort of glancing through Reddit after I watched the episode, because, it was like, I wanted people to post screenshots and clips from old episodes, because I immediately wanted to rewatch the whole show. I immediately wanted to go back to episode 1 and start watching with this knowledge in mind. And reread several scenes with this new knowledge. And people are posting, things about, here's a conversation from episode 1 about Elliot being scared to go home, and here's a conversation, like, and all these things have a whole new context. But what's so great about this is that, yes, if you look deep enough on Reddit or wherever, there's a couple of guesses here or there from all the way back in season 2 that got it right. And the reason why they got it right is because it's not actually a completely out of left field like twist or anything like that. It actually adds up. It actually just makes a whole lot of sense. In fact, one of the things that I have learned since this episode aired is that DID, which is what Elliot has the medical term that he actually is diagnosed with. The most common cause of that is what is revealed in this episode. So anyone who knows that and has been watching this show could have made that call based on just what they know about the real world. Maybe they know someone with the condition, maybe whatever, and they would have gotten it right just because the show is actually well researched and knows what it's doing.
It's one of those things that there's a point in this episode where you kind of know where this is going for certainty.
You start to dread it coming because you're hoping it won't go there. You can feel it and you're like, no, don't go there.
And your mind is going back to prominent episodes, prominent moments from very early episodes. We'll get to some of those later.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, actually, the first thing I noted down in my notes here when I did my second viewing is 2.35 to 1, which obviously I love when shows do this. But notably, Mr. Robot, this is the second time it's done it. And, when I first started watching the episode the first time, I thought, hey, the last episode did this was the one where he was suicidal and he was with Trenton's little brother. And again, the new information in this episode kind of neatly actually connects the two of them thematically, that tells you why these two are paired in some way.
Do you know what's funny about that? The using the aspect ratio, especially when a TV show does it, we go, oh, it's going to be more cinematic, right? And that's the general, the buzzword that is used when this is a straight up stage play.
Yeah, this is more of a stage play, even though, again, it is 2.35 to 1, so it is inherently more cinematic, and Even the lenses are different. It looks more cinematic, but it is structured in 5 acts. It even comes up saying Act 1, 2, 3, blah 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 blah. And I'm not going to take credit for this one, but I did see online, and actually it kind of works when you look at what's in each act. Each act is one of the 5 stages of grief. Act 1 is denial. Elliot denies the problem that he's in. Mr. Robot's trying to convince him, blah blah blah. Act 2 is anger. That's where Mr. Robot actually sort of takes over and kind of challenges Vera, kind of thing. Act 3 is bargaining. Oh, I've got a plan. I can get you money. Blah 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 blah. Right. Act 4 is depression. We'll go into what the depression is later. And then Act 5 is acceptance, at least to some degree.
We'll get there.
Yeah. But
that's quite amusing and clever.
Yeah, very good.
The extent to which this feels like a stage play, it's all in the one location. This feels like you can scale this to any stage in terms of the production budget.
Oh sure, yeah. I mean, this, other than opening, getting out of the car at the very, very, very start, all of it's in Chris's apartment. It's all in her either sort of living room, kitchen area, which is all kind of one connected room,
or the office.
Or the office, yeah, her therapist office, and it goes back and forth between there. The other thing that makes it feel like a stage play, other than the act breaks, is very much the music. It goes very theatrical and over the top in a very dramatic way.
I would go one step further.
On the thunder. The thunder as well is very stage play-esque.
It is. The music to the point where, in terms of, I say I can see this scaling to any size theatre production, is that I can see this music. Okay, you could have an actual orchestra, at the bottom of your pit and actually playing it, there. Or I can see this, okay, on the cheaper productions, stick this on a CD and time it, right? You can, it would scale so well, and that's a compliment in this regard.
It wouldn't even surprise me if they do like a one-off special or something like that, where Esmail actually goes and directs like a production of this for stage.
I could see it, yeah. That would be kind of glorious.
Maybe, I mean, it was too late to announce this now, but it was the sort of thing where, let's say this wasn't the last season, there was another season to go. It's the sort of thing you might do right before the finale. Like, we'll do a stage production of that one episode that was a stage play, kind of thing.
Yeah. I could see that. That'd be a blast.
There is one notable scene where the music actually kind of regresses. That sounds negative. I don't mean it in a negative way.
It goes back to what you think of.
It goes more ethereal again, and I think it's right to do it at that moment when it does, because it's a very serious moment. Whereas, obviously, because the theatricality, even though it works in a very kind of clashy way that the Mr. Robot sometimes will play with, ultimately when it gets to the emotion of the big beat that we're going to get to, it makes sense to not betray that by having the gimmick kind of interfere with it.
Worth noting, though, even when we get to that point, it doesn't revert to the regular synths and such, or the piano that we're used to on this. It still goes with the operatic strings that it has been using the entire episode. It just uses them more delicately.
Yes, but it's not doing da-na-na-na.
Exactly, yeah. It's using them properly.
For an example.
There's actually, during one of the speeches at the end, the very last one, there is a gorgeous rendition of one of the main themes. It's been around since, I think, at the start of the show. And it's this phenomenal orchestration and arrangement of it. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, another thing I noted down about this, because obviously this season, and we don't see any other characters, we stay at this house, we don't see Darlene or Dom or whoever. We stay at this house, and one of the neat things here is that this show has been moving, not quite in real time, but very condensed time, especially over the last 3 or 4 episodes, where it was Christmas Eve, he went to see Olivia, then it was Christmas night in the woods, then it was Christmas morning, they had a little heist that was silent, and then we had the last episode, and then this episode, I said, I don't expect him to get to this Davis meeting for another couple. And again, after this one, I'm like, yeah, there's at least another one before we get to that, because
I agree.
Because ultimately, Elliot has to get to some sort of state of mind that makes it possible. But
I would say the only reason to do the Davis meeting next episode would be to do it while Elliot is like this and how that affects it.
Yeah, but it's still Elliot, because what I was going to say is that this episode actually transitions them from daylight to nighttime. It's December, of course, so it means that, it could only be it could be 5 p.m. at the end of this episode. It doesn't have to be late. But I think what's genius about this, just from a technical aspect, is that it's easier to hide and transition smoothly indoors, where you're choosing to light through the windows yourself. All the lighting through the windows is controlled. It's not the actual daylight. Whereas out in the streets, you're having to pick your times and sort of shoot at the right, that twilight magical hour kind of thing.
And presumably, it's a lot easier to shoot at night in the sense of There's a period, at the start and end where it's getting dark or getting light, but once it's dark, that's it. It's kind of just dark
Oh
for
yeah, you can shoot.
hours.
You can shoot any hour you want while it's dark, and
Yeah.
do that. Daytime for them, you can cheat daytime, even though technically
You can,
there's a
yeah,
difference.
but you can notice the difference if you're looking for it, and I mean, like I say, you can hide it, but it's just more work, right?
Yeah, indoors you can cheat as much as you want, and while obviously this show has a lot of great location and stuff, I think it's genius that the transition from day to night happens in an episode like this, where it's never even a thought in our heads that it's doing that, because we're just too wrapped up in the
I kind of noticed because
story.
at the start, it had that gorgeous light shaft coming through again
Mm-hmm.
from that same window that we were talking about last episode.
But it was
Hitting
different because
Elliot
it was a
this
little bit
time.
later.
Yeah, it was going to the other direction.
It was
so
it was
before
more it was more golden because it was getting to dusk.
It was, but even just the direction of the light shaft, because before it was hitting towards kind of the leftish way towards the counter, whereas this time it went towards the right where Elliot was sitting.
So let's get into it then, because there's so much to talk about. We've spent 10+ minutes before we've even gotten to the actual.
We've spent 10 minutes on the fluff.
On the technical stuff. We're getting the technical stuff out of the way before we get to the important character stuff. So yeah, my first thing notes were all, theatrical music 2.35 to 1, and I'll talk about when we get to the reveal how it connects to the other episode, and controlling light. So Act 1, really easy to label this one.
Just before we get into we're talking, it is split into acts. I want to give USA just a little bit of credit for running this with no ads, because this would be such an easy episode to go, well, there's your ad break.
And notably, it was longer as well because of that. It was almost a full hour. It was like 57 minutes, something like that.
Yeah. So no, I credit where it's due. They've been pretty good to the show.
Which I didn't know about when I started it, by the way. I just started the episode and I was like, oh, it's longer. Okay.
I knew because I saw a tweet from Esmail first thing this morning that popped up on my Twitter saying, hey, it's no ads. So I thought, okay, it's probably the full hour.
Yeah. Worth mentioning, at the time of recording, this episode is number 3 on IMDb's top TV episodes of all time list. Obviously, it's just generated by voting.
Of all time, okay. I thought you were going to say just of the show.
No. I mean, number 1's an Attack on Titan episode, so take it with a grain of salt. Doesn't really mean much, but...
Is episode 2 a Breaking Bad episode or a Game of Thrones episode?
Not number 2, but I think Ozymandias from Breaking Bad was like number 4 or 5. It was up there.
Yeah, I figured.
There was some Game of Thrones kind of high up, although notably they were all from like 2016. There was nothing from the last season.
It wouldn't be. I'm really intrigued as to what the number 2 is now.
Well, I can't remember.
Maybe
it was this. Maybe it was number 2 and not number 3. Maybe I'm just misremembering which one it was. I didn't think I was going to have to.
Just a user-created list that didn't help me.
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to have to remember.
Yeah, never mind. Google does not help me in this regard.
Let's move on. So Act 1. So Elliot's there, he's tied up, and he's immediately like thinking about escaping, and Krista and Mr. Robot's walking around, giving the lowdowns. Okay, 2 henchmen, there's a fire escape, what can we do? Yada yada yada. The Krista reveal's kind of interesting. Vera mentions that he went back to the Dominican Republic, and he goes on a whole spiel about how he kind of took over the island.
It's on the island.
Yeah, but as he's telling the story, it kind of fades away as the camera goes overhead over the fireplace wall.
Through the fireplace, yeah.
Yeah, and we have this bird's eye shot of Krista. It kind of comes down and looks at her. Very operatic again, the music and all this stuff. And it comes back to him, and we find out that he was there for 87 days. And by the 87 days, he owned the island. That was him, and then he was bored. And on the 88th day, a shaman was brought to him and gave him a cocktail. He described it very vividly, but it was a lot of nonsense. And he was shitting and puking, and shitting and puking. There was a back and forth of shitting and puking. And basically
at least it was a back and forth and not simultaneous.
Sure. But he's told that he has to go home and that he's been asleep and he needs to wake up. And he talks on a spiel about how, but this is my home. Oh no, wait, New York's really my home. That's where my path really was. And he's like, no, that door was closed to me. And then the shaman's like, no, you must go and reconcile with he who closed that path. And yeah. A lot of it's Vera doing his thing. He's doing his spiel.
I've always thought Vera. The actor. It was good. He's been fine, right? The entire show.
He's great in this episode.
But holy shit, this episode is another level. Especially even early on in this speech, and he's just going for it. It's when he gets up, I think it's around this point in the speech where he gets up and goes and stands by the window. And I'm just like, oh shit, this speech is kind of fantastic, and he is nailing it.
Yeah, there's that. There's also even the first moment where he says he promised himself he wasn't going to fanboy. Like there's just little beats like that really kind of worked. See that with New York being his home, the music gets a bit more emotional when he starts talking about that. Like it's a bit more on the emotional side. And he finishes this big speech about how he wants to own New York, about how he wants to own the entire island, and it's going to be his. And he sits down in front of Elliot and says, "What do you think?" And he's all enthusiastic, he's all excited because he's just told his plan. And the first thing out of Elliot's mouth is, "Where's Krista?" He doesn't care. He just doesn't give a shit about his plan. And this upsets him because he grabs the knife and he goes over and starts, eating some meat or whatever it is. And then that's when he sort of brings up, "Oh, this is Isaac's knife, my brother. Remember him? This is probably the knife he killed that Shayla with." And his henchmen kind of laugh, and it's like, so we just got a Shayla reference. So, which, not that Shayla in and of herself is overly important to this episode as a whole, but immediately started connecting things to season 1. It immediately started connecting things to the start of the show.
I think that, and also it's just a huge trauma in Elliot's life.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And it's like, okay, it's setting us in that mind frame.
Oh, and he brings that up as well. He's like, "Hey, my path changed at that event, and I think it did for you too." He keeps, he keeps trying to connect them through this kind of shit. And when Elliot's trying to bargain a little bit here, and he's saying, like, "Don't do this," yada yada yada. Vera, says, "Well, to be fair, I did kind of get everything I wanted back when we did this before. Shirley got killed, I got everything I wanted." But Elliot says, "Well, you didn't get me." And I thought what was interesting about that is that when he says that, like that, I think that was one of the first times the thunder rumbled, is after he said that. So I can almost see the guy with a big sheet of metal, like rumbling it off to the side. So I felt. So he's insisting he has to see Shayla. Sorry. Freudian slip. Has to see Krista, and Vera says, "Oh, you just want an introduction, a meet and greet. That's fine, but then I want my introduction." And obviously, we know where he's going with that because we saw what he was getting teased last episode.
But Elliot kind of just brushes over it right now.
Yeah, but it fades to black. That's the end of Act 1. That was,
and again, I love these fade to black. It's very much the curtain being drawn.
Yeah, that's the denial portion over, and we go into Act 2, which is anger. So we're in the office, the therapist office, and she's there. She's still gagged for a while. Vera doesn't really want him to talk to her. He's like, no, you got to see her, and that's all you get. I want to meet Mr. Robot, and I love the way he delivers it. The way he steps in and tilts his head, and
so close.
Yeah, it's very much. And what's interesting here, and again, this is kind of foreshadowing in a way, is. Elliot's like, no, like, because he says, "Oh, what do I do? Do I say his name 3 times? Do I like feed you something? Put out some candles? Like, how do I call Mr. Robot out?" And ultimately, Elliot at one point says, "Don't touch her," and he says, "Oh, I'm not going to touch her. I'm just going to take a temperature." And he starts putting his hand up Krista's leg, and it's very intimidating. It's very, very aggressive. And he says, "Oh, I won't do anything." But my henchman here, he just got out of prison. He's been looking at her all day with those eyes. Like, he's going to have to feed soon. And it's very notable to me that it's the threat of sexual violence where Mr. Robot appears and says, "All right, F-face, like, what do you want?"
And I love the appearance because when we see Elliot, he's been physically held, I think, by the 2 henchmen at this point, on either arm. And then when Mr. Robot's there, he's smug. He's up against the bookshelf at the back. Henchmen are not in shot at all.
And I was stealing the F-face line from a little bit later. What he actually says here is, "You want to talk? Let's talk." Very, very, traditional kind of line, but beautiful in how it's delivered here. And he comes in and like, he's like, "How do I know it's you?" And he's sort of looking him up and down. And there's a moment here where Peanuts, one of the henchmen, doesn't like that he calls him F-face. He calls Vera F-face, and he pulls out his gun. He's like, "Oh, where's that? That wasn't not machismo. Courage.
Confidence.
It was courage. Yeah. Where's that courage now?" And he just sort of turns and looks right at the gun and says, "Right here," or "Right the F here." And Vera, there's a lot of moments in this episode where Vera kind of tells him, like, "Calm down, stop doing your stupid shit, keep your mouth shut, like, let this play out." Like, he keeps doing that.
Yeah,
and
he gets so annoyed at his henchmen, doesn't he?
But he kind of gets giggly in Mr. Robot's like, "What's funny?" He's like, "Oh, it's a bit of a trip. Like, it's like I'm actually talking to someone else." He's like, "Well, you are, so keep talking." So very good. And he, and it gets to kind of the crux of the matter. What Vera wants to know is, why are you here? Which is essentially the question that this episode is going to answer: is why does Mr. Robot exist? That's where we're going.
It's been a question for the whole show, really.
Yeah, and I think it's the wise choice to have a whole episode about that, like about that revelation. The entire thing revolves around getting to that moment.
Oh, definitely.
So he says, "Why are you here?" And he says, "Well, when assholes like you roll around, I make sure there's someone on his side. So you're out from." And he cracks some jokes about, "Oh, you're the muscle, not doing a very good job because look at the position you're in now," that kind of stuff. And he asked the question again. He's like, "Oh, so tell me why you're here." And ask you what you do. Why are you here? And he just says he needed me. And what I thought was interesting here is that Mr. Robot immediately tries to change the subject. He tries to flip it to say, "Okay, but what the hell do you even want anyway, Vera? What's your plan? What's going on?" And he actually does that multiple times. He does that twice here because, again, Vera brings it back round to talking about why he exists. And again, Mr. Robot deflects and starts to asking, "Why are you here?" And Vera goes on his whole rant about owning the city. In fact, my note just says Vera's delusional plan. That was my entire note for his speech here. About
it was I don't just want drugs. I want the billboards, the shops.
The cops, everything. He wants to control everything, the entire infrastructure of the city. So and then Mr. Robot's like, "What? So you want to get any real estate? That's what you want?" And he goes in this really demeaning speech about how he's an idiot and how, "Oh, you want to do this," and essentially what you're doing is you're just taking on the city's debt. Because he describes the city as one giant credit card bill. And all you want to do is take it from them. And, like, you'll be the one owned by the banks, and you'll be the one doing this. Like, this is pointless. You want to get into billboards? Get Photoshop. Make a portfolio. You want to, start buying up real estate? Go to the real estate college in Brooklyn. Leave me out of it. Why am I here?
It was, the one that made me laugh is, you want the stores? In the financial situation they're in right now, they'll be giving them away. Go with them some cash, and they'll give you them no problem, but you'll have to deal with their debt. And
the perfect part is that he says, "You're going to need money for this," and Vera says, "Oh, how much? I can rob some places. How much do I need?" And he sort of laughs, says, "If you're asking that question, it just shows how in over your head you actually are." Like, the idea of how much money it will take to actually own the entire goddamn city. And of course, we already know that they're about to steal a lot of money, like an absurd amount of money from the Deus Group.
Unhealthy amount of money.
Yes, an unfathomable amount. Probably an amount that I can't name because I don't know how many, what you call that many zeros. So Mr. Robot turns around and is like, "Hey, I've got a plan. I can actually get you that money. There's something in the works. Something may actually help you here." And he says, "But any plan that we have is going to start with letting Krista go." And I think it's interesting, even Mr. Robot's kind of fighting for that. Like, he's like, because I think in the past, like, Mr. Robot would be happy to let someone go under the bus to save Elliot's ass.
Yeah, I think this has showed just how more on side with Elliot he's been for a while now, to be fair. Kind of how, I mean, with the crossing of the line before, it's him that had the moral line this time now, and reminding Elliot of that.
Yeah, so I don't know, but I think, I hesitate to use this word, but I'd almost argue it shows that he's healthier for Elliot than he used to be. Even if the existence of him in and of itself is not healthy.
Yeah, I think their relationship is healthier than it was before, certainly. I mean, I think that's long established by the fact that he's not forcibly taking over and Elliot's losing time. That's already, okay, well, we're way healthier now.
But of course, one of the things that Elliot said before in Act 1 was that the only leverage they have over Elliot is Krista, so they remember that and say, "Hey, that's what you said." And I do like this little touch here that it wasn't him that said that, it was Elliot. Mr. Robot's now making this offer, and Elliot was there before. They're not one and the same, even though obviously they're looking at him as one and the same. It's a nice little touch there that I appreciate. But then he says that Krista doesn't trust Elliot, and brings up the notes eventually, but this is when Elliot comes back in. This is when Elliot walks back into the scene. Mr. Robot's still standing there, but Elliot walks back into the scene. And he's like, "Hey, I'll show you the plan. We've got this big plan. Let me show it to you." And that's kind of how this part ends. But Vera does come into Elliot and says, "You don't need Mr. Robot. He's all the bark," implying that Elliot is the bite, and that I am more scared of you than him. So and that's the end of Act 2.
It's an interesting point there, though. Is like, how much do you believe him? Is he just saying that because we know what his plan is with Elliot? He kind of told Krista before.
Yeah.
So, is it that this just him, kind of getting on side and buttering up his ego, so to speak, or does he actually believe that?
No, I think it's true. I think even though he does have the plan, he has the motive of what he's doing. I think so much of it is based upon having to be formed around truth that I feel like he does believe this. And I think I believe it as well when I think about it. Like ultimately, Elliot's the one who's actually done.
Oh no, I think we've actually seen that, absolutely, and we know that. But I just wondered if he had that feeling as well, especially as we know things like the whole 5-9 thing. At least that's all Mr. Robot as far as they're concerned. That wasn't Elliot, that was Mr. Robot. But so him making that statement here of being more scared of Elliot, it feels notable with him having that information.
Yeah, I mean, you could just take that as him recognizing the potential in Elliot, even if he's not seen him do anything as extreme that would top what he thinks Mr. Robot's responsible for. Act 3, a little bit shorter. They get him his bag with a laptop, and he gets out the details, all the emails and the account numbers and all the money that's there. And they're all, jaws are dropping because I've never seen this many zeros before. But of course, the tension here is that Elliot sees his gun in his bag, and he's, try to go for it throughout the scene. And he eventually does, and they say he doesn't have the balls to pull the trigger, which he then does, but there's nothing in it. There's nothing in the chamber, nothing in the clip.
Yeah, you kind of knew where this was going, didn't you?
And they mock him because they obviously checked his bag, they pulled out the bullets, and essentially just to sort of test him to see if he would actually do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of respect from Vera here in that. He expected him to go for the gun.
No,
but
he says that. He literally says it at one point. He says that, you old Elliot would never have done this. I like to think I had something to do with this. I'm proud of you, bro. Like, he says that.
Yeah.
So, again, it's just showing that Elliot has changed since, that first season, or even early season 2, for that matter. And then he brings in Krista and gets very, threatening if he's going to kill her. It's a bit of a, pickle that we're in because I can't kill Krista because it's my only leverage, but I also have to teach you a lesson for what you just did because I can't trust you anymore. And both Elliot and Mr. Robot are actually pleading. They're both yelling at different points, saying, "Hey, we can still do the plan. Don't let this get in the way of all those zeros." And Elliot ultimately says, "Hey, after I steal the money, I'll be your partner. I'll be what you want me to be." And he's like, "No, I can't trust you now." Kind of thing.
This is the literal bargaining here.
This
is to the head.
Yeah, this is when it really gets to the bargaining part of this. And he says, "Well, why not shoot her?" And Elliot finally shouts out, "Because I need her." And for Vera's perspective, it kind of clicks to him what she is to him. He's like, "Oh, this is your shaman." This is because we hear that he had a shaman. Like, that's all we ever hear. We don't see any of it, of course, but that's how he relates to this. He's like, "Okay, I understand what has to happen now. You have to speak to your shaman and get to the truth." Kind of like he did. He got to his truth, as misguided as it might have been.
And again, this is from this point, something bad's going to happen because the whole point of the shaman is he gave him the horrible thing where he was, puking and shitting, and it was terrible for however long it was until it was better. Until he came to the realization after. So you kind of know Elliot's about to go through some trauma here.
Yes. Which gets us to Act 4, Depression. And I have a lot of notes for this act.
I bet you do.
It's so it's a therapy session. They ungag Krista. She's sitting there.
Elliot's trying to guide her into it because it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, at first they send out the henchman because she sort of makes it clear that this is meant to be private, and he's not willing to leave himself, Vera, but he does send out the 2 henchmen.
Yeah, although they're very disrespectful henchmen, aren't they? Because the first they literally just answer back, "Go, now we're gonna stay. We want to see how this goes."
Well, until he speaks up and he gets scared. But yeah, he kind of talks her through it because she's very nervous, and he's like, "Hey, it's like a normal therapy session. We've done this before. Just talk to me like you used to." And she's like, "Okay, so what's new with you?" He's like, "Well, my mom died a couple of days ago. That's new. I don't really feel anything. Is that weird? Is that bad?" And they kind of go back and forth a little bit about that, and then Vera kind of jumps in and says, "No, this is boring. We know this already. We have to get to the meat," or I think it's what the phrase he uses. We have to get to the gold, the real 24 carat. Is the way he put it.
Yeah, that was it. And Joe, I love that. This is so clear in my mind in that when he's saying that line, I can picture how he's walked across. He's got the folder, and he's on the bottom left of the screen here. I can picture exactly where he is when he's saying these
you can
things.
picture the stage directions in your head.
Yeah.
I'll bring something up here. Actually, I've not actually double checked this. I've not corroborated this, but I did see someone online say the name Vera meant truth, which is just an interesting touch if that's true. Which I think is interesting, given that ultimately his entire purpose in this show, then, given that he meets his end at the end of this episode, is to reveal Elliot's truth. So yeah, at this point, Vera's got Krista's notes and he's kind of looking through them and he reads parts of it out. He's like, Elliot's secret, that word very specifically, secret can only be accessed through Mr. Robot. And what's interesting is Mr. Robot appears, but notably with a subtle change, is that he is missing his hat. And I don't specifically remember when or when not he had his hat before, in previous seasons, but I think there's maybe an interesting analysis.
I mean, I could be wrong, but to my memory, he's mostly always had the hat.
I think it's clear that there's a change here.
Yeah.
In this moment, and I think what's interesting is that Krista keeps saying, "This is not how this is meant to work. This is not how therapy works. You can't just read all my initial thoughts that I'm going to try and get him to open up about and just say them to him and make him force him down that path. Like, that's not how it's meant to work.
Pretty obviously. Unhealthy.
And that's fine. So the reason why she doesn't want him to hear this makes complete sense. But obviously Elliot wants to know. He keeps saying, "What's he talking about? What's he talking about? Tell me, Krista." But then the other thing is that Mr. Robot also keeps saying, "Don't do this, Krista, don't do this. Stop asking Elliot." And Elliot himself eventually says, "She doesn't want me to know, and neither do you."
Yeah.
They're both hiding this from him.
You kind of just know this is bad, the way he's holding this back. And, you know, we've got the sense of, okay, whatever happened, this is why he's here. And it's okay. It's all coming back to previous events of...
And I lost count of the amount of times Mr. Robot says, "No, don't do this." Like, he says that several times.
Yeah.
Several times. And then Vera's looking at the notes, says, and one of them's like, "Oh, bring back up window event." And he's like, "What's so special about this window event?" And of course, I think what's genius about this window event, right, before we even get into where we go with this, is that much like Vera himself, actually, that event hasn't really been brought up in a long time. It was a big thing in season 1.
And I think some of season 2.
And it may have been brought up a bit in season 2, but I don't really remember it popping up in season 3, and it's definitely not popped up in season 4. It's been a long time since we've heard about this window event. And I think it's very interesting that this regress thing has actually been put further back. It's almost like as Elliot and Mr. Robot have had a better relationship, it's actually covered the memory up better. Like, it's actually done its job. You know, Mr. Robot, if he exists to not remember these things, it's done the job better since they've been on better footing.
Yeah, and again, this window scene, it's the way it's recontextualized again right here is we've already had multiple versions of this window scene, and, you know, and the way it has changed our perception of the events already multiple times.
Yeah, again, I mean, I've not mentioned every time it's happened, but I wanted to note down here as well. The rumbling thunder comes back in when the window event's brought up.
It's borderline cheesy to do the thunder, but it just works because it's just so ingrained in this this piece that it's doing.
I mean, it develops a mood. Does the thunder, and of course, like, Krista even asked, you know, why can't you remember this? You know, maybe even Vera asked that question. I know I was asking that question as I was watching it, and so she's recounting the events. She says, "Okay, so you know," or he does even. He's like, "Hey, we're out making snowman. Me and Darlene. We came back up looking for my dad's camera." And she's like, "Did you find the camera?" He's like, "No, my dad showed up. I hid Darlene in the closet." And again, even the idea that he's hiding Darlene is something that's recontextualized by what we find out.
We've always known that he's done that.
For a long time,
Well, yeah, not always. I think that was when she told him.
But at the end of the season, when we heard the new version of it.
Yeah. So that's been the version in our heads for a significant amount of time now.
He grabbed the baseball bat as well. So that's the thing. So it's like he hears the dad coming, he hides his sister, and grabs a bat for defense. Now we've always known that, but this is the thing: is that way back when it was always like, is he abusive just physically in the sense that, did he push him out the window? And then it was revealed, no, Elliot jumped out the window. And we speculated, was there another personality that did that? And we kind of find out that it was Mr. Robot, and we'll get to that in a second. But we never necessarily questioned as to why the other personality would want to do that. Like, because I think back at the time, because back in season 1, we were really questioning the idea of, like, does Mr. Robot actually want to help Elliot? Is he against Elliot? Does he want to hurt Elliot? We weren't sure at the time how much Mr. Robot is pro or anti-Elliot, I guess.
No, I agree. I think because at the time, Mr. Robot was very antagonistic.
Yes. So
it was very forcible, these takeovers.
Yeah, so we weren't really considering the idea that he was doing this for a good reason, and then if so, why?
Which is the obvious question. I mean, even before that, why did he hide Darlene, right?
Yes. So this is, again, all the details are there to kind of like form this theory, which is great. It's just good TV writing. It's good that this has clearly been planned since day one. It's clearly been there since the start.
And it's probably at this point in the episode where you kind of know exactly where this is going. You kind of get that sinking feeling now.
I think you get the sinking feeling here. I think in the moment where it feels inevitable, where you lose hope that it's not going anywhere else, but you still want to hope, is when Krista eventually says, what were you worried, or what did he ask you to do, or what were you worried that he would ask you to do? It was when she phrases it that way. That's the moment where it's like, oh God, like it can't.
I think I was already there before that.
Well, no, I was already thinking it, but that was the moment where, as much as I want it to go a different way, I don't think it can after that question.
Okay.
Because before that, you're already sort of starting to think. As soon as they start talking about why are you scared of your dad, because that question comes up like 3 times, like why were you scared of him? And Mr. Robot's still yelling at her, "Don't do this. If you do this, this will break him. You can't. I am here to save him from this."
Do you know what? I think it's from that point that I'm going to defend this as opposed to the later comment in that the earliest version of this was already him being physically abusive, right? And Mr. Robot wasn't scared of. I don't think he's scared of Elliot learning that truth again, because Elliot's already lived through that for years.
Oh sure. There was going to be a new thing. Of course, there was going to be a new thing. There was never a question that there was going to be a new detail we didn't know.
No, I know, but I think when you take that into context of, okay, so it's not the physical abuse, I think there is the obvious conclusion that it jumps to here in your mind.
Well, not exactly, but you're still hoping it's going to go somewhere else. You're still hoping that it'll be something else. You're praying and hoping in your mind that it'll be something that we can't think of. There's going to be some clever twist here. That's still dark and still unpleasant, but it isn't going to go in there.
Okay, I had no hope at this stage. I was resigned to it already, personally.
Oh no, I was hoping. Because hope's important. Connor has no soul, and that's why.
Maybe that's true.
So, so why can't he remember? We're going through all this. And it brings up, like, hey, so you lost time. Like, because she makes a point of saying, hey, so you remember these things? And he's like, no, Darlene told me. And, we remember Darlene telling him this. This was a thing that happened. Darlene told him this story way back when. And she's like, so you lost time? Has that ever happened, in other instances like this? And he's like, well, no, not on, except for when Mr. Robot takes over. Right? But much like we've been saying for a long time, we were under the impression that Mr. Robot was only really created sometime around or soon before season 1, right? That was always a thing, and there was something before that. Although that said, we always thought there was something before that. This maybe seems to imply that it was Mr. Robot before. He just sort of left for a while, and Elliot forgot about him and came back.
There was always, I think, when we had the big reveal with Darlene, it was always it happening again. And we were like, okay, so this has happened before on some scale. We just assumed it was someone else, not Mr. Robot.
Yeah, I mean, I've got more to say about that in a minute, but
okay.
So last time Mr. Robot, and then Elliot gets accusatory and says, because Mr. Robot's saying this, he's dangerous, he's not supposed to know. Elliot's like, wait, how long have you been around? How long, like, you've been with me since that early? Like, what, when did you show up? And, Krista keeps asking the questions. Why would Mr. Robot jump out the window to protect you? Why would he jump out the window to protect Elliot? Why would you be scared of your father? Why would you react by hiding your sister and grabbing a baseball bat? And Mr. Robot says, don't do this, this will destroy him. Why would I be scared of my father? He's my friend. That's something that Elliot says. And let me remind you just at this moment, this juncture here, that word friend. Well, not every episode, but like every episode that we do, I say it at the start. But Elliot, since the start of the show, always starts with "hello, friend." It even recontextualizes his use of the word "friend." This idea that friend to him is a lie. That friend to him was what his father pretended to be when he wasn't doing the other things. And we're about to get to that
as well when he said he was my only friend.
He was my only friend, yeah. And then it's actually after that line, he was my friend, my only friend. Mr. Robot says, "I can't protect you anymore," and walks out of shot and out of the episode. Now, I don't think for a second this is the last time we see him. I think there's definitely a culmination still to come with Elliot, coming to terms or peace with Mr. Robot and actually talking to him again. But at least for probably at least the next episode or next couple, I think Mr. Robot's gone.
No, I agree. And if for whatever reason we don't get that resolution, and this is the end of Mr. Robot, it kind of works in a sense.
It works. I don't think for a second it is, but it does work if it is.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think it's a bad thing if he does come back. I think there is more to do with him. If
oh yeah,
there's definitely stuff to do where he wants to speak to Mr. Robot again, or even the idea that he has to have Mr. Robot be part. Because I think almost essentially what has to happen at the end of the show is that he has to kind of merge with him. He has to merge with all his parts, if that makes sense.
Probably, but also just the idea of okay, let's go and again, they are completely separate people, right? For all intents and purposes here, that Mr. Robot realizes that that's not the only job he had. He couldn't protect him from that anymore, but he can still do something.
Sure, he can still protect him from all those things. He's still. I mean, if you look at it this way, if he's just a part of Elliot, then he's still a strong part of Elliot that's there as a fighting mechanism, even if it's recontextualized by knowing what he was hiding before.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mr. Robot walks out. Can't protect you anymore. Actually, he actually says that because of the order I've written this down. He says that before Elliot adds, "He was my only friend." So I just clarify that was after he walks out. Next page.
That was the most dramatic page turn you've ever done. Appropriate for this episode.
Well, it's a new pad. This paper has more of a sound to it, I think, compared to the other one.
It does. Was the other one on rings?
It was on rings. This one's not. Which I actually preferred the rings. The rings were easier to put around, but whatever.
I agree. No.
So Krista recaps the event. She says, "Okay, you went out looking for the camera," which, by the way, given what we're about to find out, it makes me wonder what might have been on that camera.
I'll be honest, I hadn't even considered that. But
I mean, I think there's a possibility. So Krista recaps the event. She went out for the camera. You heard your dad coming. You put Darlie in the closet. You grabbed a bat, and it's during this as she's recounting these events, particularly when she gets to the part where you got scared because you heard your father coming. Rami Malek, I need to give it up for him. He needs an Emmy for this episode. He starts just saying no, 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 and he starts doing this thing where his head's kind of hunched into his neck.
Do you know what? This show's always had a lot of headroom, and he's always seemed small in the frame. Well, not just him, a lot of people, but he shrinks here. Like he seems tiny.
Yeah. And he's just saying no. It's like he's starting to really remember, even if he's not said it yet. Were you afraid that your father was going to ask you to do something? And that was the line where I'm like, oh god, this can't be anything else. Like up until now, I had some doubt that maybe it was something else. That maybe somehow the show was tricking me and was going to sideline me with something that I'd never considered. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this, is that it's exactly the worst thing you're thinking already, and that's what makes it worse. And Elliot says yes, and a tear goes down his eye as he says yes.
Yeah. The tear makes it.
Yeah, and
I say that as someone who usually finds the single tear cheesy. It's not here.
Yeah, it says I remember, and then she just flat out asked the question. This is obviously something she was going to build up to. She knew this was where this was going to go in 10 sessions time, when he finally maybe got closer to opening up. Maybe he was at a point where he was going to be healthy enough to accept this information, which she clearly does not think he is right now, but she's been forced out of this position. And it's worth mentioning, after a couple of lines where, Vera's in the background saying, yeah, go find that poison, Elliot, he kind of fades away into the background, and we don't really hear from him for a lot of this emotional part of it.
There's actually a very intentional thing, because you can see him in the shot next to Krista, from waist down. He's just, because he's stood up, but you can see him because he stands out. He's wearing bright colors, and then there is a point where he strolls away, and he goes. Obviously, he's going around to look at it from the other side in context. But the way this works in the shot is he's just no longer there. We are down to just Krista and
Yeah.
Elliot.
And she finally asked the question, did your father sexually molest you? And again, Elliot starts, as he's crying, says yes. And this is when the music's a bit more emotional, and it lingers on him crying and just sort of accepting. Accepting's not the right word, because this isn't acceptance, but him processing that he's remembering this now. He's crying, he's slinking down, he's rocking back and forth. And the fade to black here for the end of this act is a lot slower than the other acts.
It is,
this,
yeah.
This is like a very slow fade to black as we are watching him weep. And I loved two great single tears in this, because Krista also has a tear when she asked the question, and he says yes, and it's perfect because she knows what she's doing to him. She knows what she's bringing up here.
Yeah, and she did not want to do it this way. Like, she would have got there eventually in a professional, proper manner, because that's kind of what her job was.
But again,
but not like this.
Kind of like some people might have thought of this seasons ago. Most people watching this episode probably had it in their head, minutes before it finally was said. Not unlike, the sister reveal in season 1, where you realize it just the same time he does, and he says it, or even just the Mr. Robot's in his head. Like, we kind of all figured that out at some point. Maybe it depends, varying person to person, but we all figured that out in season 1. Here, Krista, from season 1, from episode 1, always knew she was going to eventually have to ask this question. She was always going to prod this particular subject. She was always going to go here, and it was always there lingering in the background. It doesn't feel like something that's been added for drama late in the game. It doesn't feel like, oh, this will make it even darker, this will be better. And I go, I'm thinking back to the episode 4 where he was drugged up, and in season 1, and it was like the weird sort of David Lynch episode where he's going through all these dreams, and Angela's talking about the monster that's coming. I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking about, why were him and Darlene making happy birthday tapes or Mother's Day tapes for Angela's mother? Probably because they went to live with Angela after their father was arrested for being a paedophile. You think about way back in season 1 when Mr. Robot and Elliot were talking about this, and Elliot basically reveals, or there was this idea that his dad was angry at him for telling his mother, that about his dad's cancer. Now I'm thinking, was it the cancer that he told her about? Was that the secret? I don't think it was now.
Probably not. I think, do you know what, it's funny, at work today, someone was asking me, oh, are you doing a review for anything tonight? And I was like, yeah, Mr. Robot, I'm looking forward to watching it. And they were like, oh, what is it? And, I was like, how do you even describe Mr. Robot to someone anymore? I was like, hacker takes down capitalism, because I'm thinking season 1.
Yeah.
And they're like, just tell me on like the opening of the show, and I'll check it out. And I described the first. I thought, okay,
the opening scene,
the opening scene, where he is taking down, the pedophile, and I'm like, this has been his motivation since the start. This was literally the first thing he did.
Very few shows, when they get to final season revelations, feel as well ingrained and always part of it than what this is. This, you go back to, again, the very first scene is him taking down a paedophile. That's always been a sticking point. The scene, the episode that I was going to compare this to, or connect it to, the suicide episode where, again, it was 2.35 to 1. He was with Trenton's little brother. The fact that a child is what convinced him not to commit suicide. The fact that, because he was also a broken child, is a big deal. That's partly why it's also in the same aspect ratio. That episode also started in the movie theater where he was with his dad. This was after he got his arm hurt, and his dad was apologizing. And I saw someone posted the subtitles at that moment, and it's actually at the start of this episode. In the previous one, when I watched that again, it was actually there at the start of this one.
Okay.
Where he's like, I'm sorry, and young Elliot says, "You're not sorry. You're sick, and you're not sorry," or something to that effect. Like, it's there, and the fact that he doesn't care when his dad dies. Which, by the way, does his dad? I mean, I didn't even ponder, did his dad even have cancer, and it was just Angela's mum who died from the plant? But I think the other characters have mentioned it enough that I think he did have cancer. It's just...
No, I think so. Because that was, that was a big bonding thing between, Darlie and Angela, right? Is that their parents both died, right? And that was something that brought them together as
Yeah, but
a group.
how much did they care about their dad though? Really? Now that we know this.
Uh, no, it's true.
And I was reminded that there was a scene, I think in season 1, where during all these flashbacks when Ellie was at the hospital, the doctor started to ask, because he was suspicious of these bruises and how he fell out the window. He said, "I need to talk to you on your own without your parents and get the information." I mean, and I think it cuts away before we actually get to hear all the questions. We just get to hear kind of the start of it happening. And I almost wonder, was that the moment where he fessed up and told him what his dad had done? And this is the weird thing, is that it obviously puts this dark spin in every flashback we've had of his father, and all those photographs of him being with his father and like how close they were. It puts a really dark spin in all of that, and how manipulative and how predator-like that relationship was. But the weird thing is, Mr. Robot himself, we have to remember, is not his father. Mr. Robot has the face of his father, and it makes sense that Elliot, in trying to cover up the memories, has the best parts of his father as the image of this entity that's his friend that protects him, kind of thing. It makes sense, but I think we have to remember that we go back and watch the whole show. Like, we don't hate Mr. Robot the whole time because it's not him. He's not.
Of course, absolutely.
He's not his father, and I think that's a really interesting mix. But at the same time, we're going to think about it every time we look at him.
Oh, absolutely. It's always going to be there. And I'm thinking a couple episodes ago when we got the room inside the head, and it was young Elliot. It was the kid, right?
And they're waiting.
Definitely was. It was the kid before Mr. Robot had covered this up. I assume at this point, it was a kid who was aware of what had happened.
Yes, and we have young Elliot in that scene, and we have the mother in that scene, and presumably, like, they're again. I go back to the unification. The idea that young Elliot, current Elliot, and Mr. Robot all have to like merge because they're all parts of him. They're all equal parts.
Does this make his relationship with his mother much sadder, in the sense that, the way we've seen it has always been this very strained relationship, and he had this great, again, as the show has portrayed it, he had this great relationship with his dad and not with his mother. And I just wonder if, by Mr. Robot covering it up and creating this delusion, as it were, did that actively harm his relationship with his mother because of that?
I don't know, because Darlene didn't seem to like her very much either. So I think
that's fair.
It might make it sadder in like just how toxic the life was, that his mother, instead of like, protecting her children, or after the fact, trying to reconnect with them and make them feel safe, was perhaps as abusive as she was. But then again, this is one of the reasons why I want to rewatch the show now after this episode, because I want to go back and see those scenes again. I want to see how it's presented and how it's portrayed, because that could really be affected by this. And the idea that our perspective of his father has been completely shifted to every time we saw him in those flashbacks being nice and wanting to like take him to the movies or whatever else, all of it changes now based on this, and I'm excited to go back and watch it, because it feels like it has been there. Just even just like bringing these scenes up again, him being scared to go home, so he picks the most dangerous car on the train to get home, or whatever else, like just lines here or there. And this idea that, wait, does Darlene know all this? And if Darlene knows all this, so let's go back to that scene you brought up, the big "I'm your sister" scene, right? Where Elliot realizes that. This idea that he's lost time and he's blocked things out and he's forgotten. Now, this is going to get really dark here, what I'm about to say, but is the reason why he defaults into kissing her because their dad had them both involved?
I'm going to assume not, because for a reason in that, Elliot hides her. He doesn't want her to get involved, I don't think. I think it's...
Sure.
I think that's him protecting her from it at all. You could
also
read it as, he doesn't need to know she's here.
Well, you could also read it, though, as that she has been involved before, and that's why he wants to protect her. He doesn't want her to go through it again. So, I mean, until we know more information, like, it's hard to say.
It is, yeah.
But Darlene's also pretty screwed up.
She is.
But it is worth mentioning, she did still kill someone, because seemingly the motivation being that they killed their father. So, but at the same time, I feel like my gut tells me, and again, I have to go back and rewatch the whole show again to really say this with certainty, but my gut tells me right now that Angela and Darlene knew about this.
I I agree. I think with that, I think they knew. I don't think she was ever involved,
Okay,
but I
that's
think they
fair.
found out after.
I think they knew about this, and
And
also
I think she was actively protecting Elliot by not telling him
sure,
the full truth.
yeah, the idea that she didn't want to add
Because
the final parts on.
going back to that moment, oh, did you forget again? Um, it's I don't think it's just about her that he forgot. She's like, oh, you forgot everything. I'm not going to tell you that. I don't want to put you through that again.
Oh, very possibly. Assuming she knows. If she doesn't know, and what she told, like her recount of that day, it just makes sense in her head. Is exactly what?
She was a kid. It's exactly what she saw. Like
Yeah.
again, everything still plays if she doesn't know.
But I think we're going to have an answer to this. I feel like one of the big things that I am looking forward to / reading now is a scene with Elliot and Darlene.
The confrontation of him saying, "Did you know, and why didn't you tell me?"
Yeah. If it takes that route, if it takes any other route, I don't know what route it's going to take, but any route where they sit down and connect. And it really, again, we ended episode, the silent episode, with them in the car holding hands because they're there for each other and how close they are and what their bond's been their entire life. And not that you can't have close brothers and sisters if one's not been traumatized, but it again adds this extra context to it where why she is so protective of him and always has been.
Yeah, and it's also why I leapt to then thinking it's going to be a confrontation in that they're finally in the best place they've been for the entire show, and that's a prime time for this confrontation to happen.
And it paints another picture as to why like Mr. Robot didn't want to like go after Olivia the way he was because it involved threatening a kid. It involved exploiting her dark past and her trauma, something that he knows Elliot also has. It's not like some of the other characters where, like, yeah, we'll go after the creepy, stalk guy who was chatting to underage girls on the internet. Like, we'll go after the Busey. Like, no mercy, right? But
that's a sentence I can hear again. We'll go after the Busey.
But like he clearly, again, this is another reason why I want to go back and watch the whole show again. Is like, is there times where Mr. Robot says let's not do this, and can I recontextualize that now because of the subject matter, because of what it might bring up?
How many other targets like Busey was the blackmail, what they had on them to do with kids?
A lot, I imagine.
Yeah, like so, it's like I say, since the start of the show, it's been a thing. But I just wonder how much, how often. I'd kind of be intrigued to see.
Yeah, scene one. Yeah, scene one. That's what it was in episode 1. So that's wonderful stuff. And then I was also reminded of this. If you remember Angela's boyfriend back in season 1, Elliot had a very strict no touching rule. He did not like to be touched by anyone that wasn't Darlene or Angela.
Yes, very vividly, and that was such a big thing.
Actually, I'll even extend that, specifically men. Seemingly, I don't think it ever became much of an issue with a woman. I think it tended to be men.
You could be right.
And again, all of these things I have to kind of go back and watch the whole show again. It just confirmed my suspicions.
Do you know what's annoying is part of me wants to start rewatching the whole show right now
and have it done for the finale.
But then the other part of me is, what else am I going to learn over the next handful of episodes that'll make me go, well, now I need to start over again?
Well, we have to talk about the third personality now, because I've seen speculation online that one, there is no third personality. Mr. Robot was lying just because he didn't want to, he didn't want Vera to get to him. Although why Mr. Robot would think Vera was going to reveal any of this, I'm not sure. The obvious speculation is that the third personality is young Elliot. But that doesn't necessarily add up as to who was talking to Vera that day, or who. Yeah, no, who Darlene was talking to that day about, when she told Elliot about Vera.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be young Elliot in the sense that Mr. Robot is not a literal Elliot, right? It's his father. It's someone else. It was a projection. I think more likely, if we're going the kid route, it's the kid from the movie theater.
Okay.
If it's going to be based after someone we've seen.
I mean, there was speculation in that episode. I kept thinking the episode was going to do that, but given how that episode ended and what it meant to him, I don't want it to be him.
That's fair. No, but what I mean is this third personality, has it always existed, or does it only look like him because of that episode? So that episode still happened; it was real, and it's.
Well, hold on. Sam Esmail's already said before that the third personality's been there the whole show.
Okay, fair enough. Then.
So it's not been something that's been created since last season. It's been
Okay, no, fair enough.
which is why I think young Elliot works in that context, because
It does, yeah.
obviously young Elliot's always been in his head. He's always been locked in there somewhere.
Yeah, no, that tracks.
And we kept expecting him to be more menacing, but I guess let's say, for example, young Elliot was talking to Darlene that day, right, about Vera, and he didn't seem to care. We always took that as a sign of kind of like badassery, like, oh, he doesn't care because Vera's not scary.
Or but what if it's literally the child does not understand?
Yeah. And I'm thinking of moments like, you know, that moment in the Silent episode where he was crying in the corner and then he like stood up before Darlene came in. Like, are those little vulnerable moments where he's really feeling the emotions? Are those moments really Elliot? Is that the third personality?
I'm going to say I hope those moments are Elliot, in the sense that I think they're more poignant if it's Elliot having the breakdown and having those feelings.
But what I mean is, though, real Elliot, not the Elliot we usually see. The real Elliot, the kid Elliot.
Okay, if you're going by the idea of that, that's slightly different.
Well, the idea that the kid Elliot is the real Elliot. Well, I mean, really, what I'm saying is that all three are the real Elliot. Even Mr. Robot is part of the real Elliot. They're all splintered.
Okay, I guess the kid Elliot is Elliot as he should be, at his best, at his healthiest.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll put it this way though: Elliot as he should be, but without years of actually dealing with the trauma. So he's actually still a wreck. He's still like a broken wreck because he can't move on, because he's not existed to move on, really.
Sure.
Right. That's how I'd phrase it. But like, look, yeah, so much came from this. So much. Like, we can go back and recontextualize the entire show. Every time he talked to Darlene about his parents, every time he talked about Angela about his parents, his relationship with Angela, even Darlene's relationship with Angela, why they were so close, why all of this, why all of this was the way it was. That said, though, if I remember correctly, his father did go to Angela's mum's funeral, and I wonder, like, if this was post arm breakage and window incident, like. Okay,
Maybe he didn't tell them.
I'd love to go back to that scene and watch that.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, we have not rewatched these episodes before this season, so yeah, we remember the moments, but the specifics, tiniest details like that, the nuance is lost on us right now.
Yeah, I cannot wait to go back and watch that again, and I'm tempted to start. I'm tempted to, for the purpose of having it all done again, before, so that I'm watching episode 12 again before 13 this season, having went through the whole thing again, or at the very least watch seasons 1, 2, 3 again. Even if I don't get through the 4 episodes again.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
I may try it because I feel like I'm going to glean some interesting little tidbits as I go.
I don't know if I have the time, but I kind of want to.
Well, I mean, there's 6 episodes left, which means there's 5 weeks.
Are they definitely airing the last one double?
Well, we don't know. Okay. I'm saying 5 weeks in the sense that.
To be to have the week between the last 2 still.
Yeah. So that's not unfeasible. It's not that many episodes really when you think about it. It's what, 32?
Oh, it's not that impossible. It's just...
of seasons 1, 2, 3, it's 32. If you add on season 4, obviously it's more. But
yeah, just in the sense that we are quite busy and there is a lot of other TV starting up in December.
I'm going to try it. Damn it! I'm going to try. I think I need to try. It's too good. It's so good. It's added so much to everything in a way that doesn't feel like a got you. It doesn't feel like a hey, we had some fancy twist.
It was of course this is it.
Of course, it has to be this. It has to be this the whole time. And I think this context is going to add so much to so many conversations, especially in season 1. But even season 2, every time he talks to Mr. Robot about his past, anytime he talks to... so much. Like, not only Elliot's past himself and the way he interacts with Mr. Robot, but even his relationship with Darlene, his relationship with Angela, the relationship between Angela and Darlene, all of these things are affected by this.
I can't wait to find out definitively whether they knew or not.
I'm looking forward to that.
Because let's say we have gut feelings right now, but that is what they are. They are just a feeling, yes or no. We don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to like when they were looking for him, because they disappeared before back in season 1, and it seems like they know what he's like. Now, admittedly, they might know he went through trauma, but not know the exact specifics. It could be a case where Darlene knows exactly the specifics, but Angela didn't know about the sexual abuse stuff.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, it could be the sort of thing where they were sent to live with Angela's family quietly, rather than making a big legal sort of like, oh, you have to move out kind of thing. You know, the idea that because that, I mean, maybe they might still be able to stay with their mother. Eventually they were, because there was definitely flashbacks of Elliot with his mother later on.
Yeah, definitely.
When he was older, as like a teenager, or maybe early teens in season 1. I remember that, but
yeah.
So much. So moving on to Act 5, though, we have to get through the rest of this episode.
We do still have the rest of the episode to talk about. Yeah.
Yes. Krista tries to comfort Elliot, but Vera just holds up his hand, says, "No, I'm going to comfort him. I'm swooping in." And already
you're like, oh shit, because obviously we knew this was his plan because he told us last episode that this is exactly what he wanted to do.
What's beautiful about it, though, is that there's a point during the Mr. Robot section where he is like making Vera look like an idiot. That you think, oh, Vera has no control. He thought he had control, but he doesn't. You get to this scene, you're like, no, Vera. I mean, maybe he didn't know what he was doing the whole time, but he definitely steered it back into control along the way.
Yeah, like maybe he didn't have control the entire time. He was skidding around a little bit, but the end point here is exactly the beat he told us that he wanted to have. He used Krista as that bat to perfection.
Yep, to perfection. To the point where he even ends his speech in a minute with the very line that he said that was at the end of the story with the bully and the little bitch.
I see you.
Yes, the I see you. And Mr. Robot, he storms it, Elliot storms into the other room, and he's like in front of the window, the lightning's flashing, and he's like, I can't live with this. I can't live with this. And again, we've had episodes where he's been suicidal, so that means a lot coming from. And Vera phrases something very interesting. Says, "Oh, now you get to finally meet the real you." This idea that this is finally going to be the real Elliot, kind of coming out, and
John, this is again where I really want to praise the acting here from Vera. Is that we know this is his plan. We know this is his manipulation to own Elliot. But he's so convincing. Like, you kind of almost believe him. Even we do almost believe him when we know exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, because Elliot even says, and this really broke me a little bit inside, is he sort of turns and says, why would he do? He doesn't finish his sentence, but he's basically questioning why would his father do this to him. He's really having trouble accepting it. And Vera sits down with him and mentions that he also has a sort of dark past. He talks about how his mother left him with her friends when she went out to do whatever, and he sort of made a point of emphasizing friends in kind of quotations, which is interesting because that's also how Elliot uses the word when you think about it. When he talks about his father being his friend, Vera's kind of implying that his mother's friends were also.
And I have no idea if this is true or not.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it could go either way. And I actually wrote down a whole speech here that he says because I thought it was that good, and I'm just going to read it for you.
Yeah.
So I missed some of the start of it, but the main part that I wrote down here is, once you weather a storm like yours, you are the storm, and it's the rest of the world that needs to run from you. Elliot, you're special. Don't you believe it? And the tears are coming down Elliot's face, and Vera's face as well, actually, at this point.
Yeah.
I don't want to be alone anymore, Elliot says. And Vera says, you're not alone. I see you. And of course, it's this point where Krista was untied, and I noted that when they left the room, that Vera kind of left her unsupervised. And I do think there's some beautiful symmetry of her using the knife that killed Shayla to stab him in the back.
Oh, definitely. And
that's wonderful.
Just before that moment, though, when he says, I see you, because you're kind of getting caught up in his speech, right? Because it's that good a speech.
Yeah, yeah.
You kind of forget that this is a bit that he's playing. Yeah, and you get caught, and then he says that line, and you go, "Oh shit, yeah, he's done all of this for this moment."
And there may be some truth to a lot of it, but yeah, he is doing his plan and he is getting his result, and it seems like it's just about working. Elliot might be giving himself over, and I think it's wonderful that Krista saves him, essentially.
She needs it. He needs it.
Yeah, she saves him from something. I mean, Elliot doesn't necessarily know he needs saving right now, but there's a manipulation here. This is someone just like his father who's going to use him. Maybe not in the same way, but it's someone who's going to use them. And Krista, knowing his plan and having the opportunity, chooses to save her patient. She upholds the doctor-patient patient confidentiality by taking out this guy who heard all this shit.
Sure.
She takes it very seriously, does Krista?
Oh, very, yeah. We never want to eavesdrop on one of her sessions.
And the episode ends with the bird's eye shot of them looking down at his body, and the lights go out as if it's a stage almost, with all the different lights going out one by one, and that's how we ended the episode. But
I noted that the Christmas tree was the last thing to go out because, of course, it was.
Of course, Christmas is great. Why wouldn't you have that be the last thing? So, but here's what I want to talk about with the speech that Vera gives. One, it's a great speech. It's actually kind of a nice, sympathetic speech about getting through trauma and actually dealing with this sort of thing and overcoming it and using it to fuel you. And it took me back, actually, something that we've said a few times in past episodes. I remember talking about this last season, especially towards the finale, is the idea that Elliot in some way is kind of a superhero. And
yeah.
I couldn't help but hear this speech in that context and kind of just think of someone like Batman. And I know that sounds weird to go there, but think of the trauma and think of how it created the Batman. And what is Mr. Robot, if not what Elliot needs to like cope and survive and be him? And what is Batman to Bruce Wayne,
the alter ego,
if not the face that he makes to cope with what he did and fight against the end? So Elliot fights pedophiles. He hunts them because of what happened to him. Batman goes after, well, everyone really, but every criminal really, but
his secret origin tragedy.
But it's kind of the same with Elliot in the sense that clearly that was his focus to begin with, but now he's taking on the corrupt, leaders of the world.
It's so fascinating that was his focus. That was a thing, and you don't think necessarily this is because it happened to him. You think, well, that's because they're terrible people and he's doing the right thing.
It makes sense. And by the end of the first episode, he's talking about the 1% of the 1%, and we find out about his father and, the cancer, and okay, all this makes sense. And you just sort of take that as his origin. Like, okay, so this company was negligent, didn't care, his father was killed because of it, and you kind of take it as that. But it was this speech from Vera where he talks about, because you get through that storm, you become the storm. And I couldn't help but think of superheroes. I couldn't help but think about Batman, because that's what Batman is. He gets through that and he becomes the thing they fear. He becomes this force of nature that they can't reckon with.
It's why I very specifically used the phrase there, secret origin, as opposed to just origin story, because we had what we thought was an origin story.
Yeah, and Elliot with Mr. Robot, and again, you can sort of take it as Mr. Robot's, because I don't think Mr. Robot is literally his alter ego in the sense that he's who he becomes. But I remember saying he was like a superhero when he stood up to White Rose at the end of last season and says, "No, I can do this hack, and I own you because I've hacked everything, and I'm better than you at this."
And we've spoken a lot about the hoodie being the superhero costume.
Yeah, the cape. Yeah. So, and I couldn't help but think of that here in a really traumatic way. And what is a superhero? But the fantasy of someone who has been a trauma overcoming it in such a way where they can really turn it into a power, but it turned up to 11 where, okay, they've got a cape and they're doing, all these crime fighting things, but being a force for good. And I think this show has been so operatic about how it handles Elliot's trauma and what he's done. And even before we knew this, it was doing that. But with this added into it, it turns it up. And this speech from Vera, despite the fact he's the villain and despite the fact that he's got a motive in what he's saying here, it actually is kind of touching and rings true.
That's why I said you get so caught up in this speech. You just start believing him. You forget that he's got this ulterior motive because it's that good a speech. And
what I love about this is that I think that we won't get the attempted hack on the Deus group next. I think what's beautiful about this is that ultimately we're going to have Elliot in a rough place next episode. We're going to have him, distraught. Krista's probably going to try and help him. I don't know where it's going immediately. But I think this whole idea of he's going to have to essentially finally become the full-fledged formation, whatever it may be, of Elliot the superhero. He has to kind of finish his origin story in time to take on the Deus group, kind of, right?
I mostly agree. I think there is a chance that he takes them on now almost as a distraction, because he's not, even still, he's just not dealing with it entirely. And it's a distraction so that he can get done. And I think if he does that, he'll make a mistake and realize he has to, deal with it before he.
So you think he fails, essentially? He's going to try and fail.
Yeah, and then when he'll have a moment of, not just a moment of clarity, but he'll get that realization. He'll come to terms. And then, not just that easily, but it'll happen, and that's when he'll be able to win.
I remember last episode where White Rose or Zhang said, Elliot needs to know that we're on the same side, and that this device is for him too, kind of thing. Like, you know, like all that kind of those illusions. Like, it makes me think: does White Rose know? Like, you know, assuming, you know, they can hack into anything. Like, is there a record of what happened to him, or was it hush hush? Because you have to think. I mean, Elliot can kind of hack into his own records anytime he wants, because he like he's good at that kind of thing. He's hacked himself. In fact, I'm sure that's even happened at some point in the show.
You know, I'm sure it has, and I'll say the only way I can defend how, if it is on the records, I can still plausibly say he didn't know, in that everything was filtered through this viewpoint of what he wanted to see. You know, how many seasons did we have it as Evil Corp instead of E Corp? And again, you know, okay, because
even the prison, like, you know, like we didn't see a prison for, you know, half a season.
Exactly. So I think in this show it is set up enough that even if this is in his records and he has looked at his own records, he didn't necessarily see that.
Yeah. So this blew doors some wide open, and this is a show that's done this multiple times. Like, this show has given us episodes like this that's blown the doors open several times throughout the show.
It's incredible how it keeps doing it, isn't it?
And every time it feels justified. It doesn't feel like it's just pulling something out of its ass. It doesn't feel like it's... And some people argued in season 2 that the prison thing was kind of like forced, and they didn't like it because it felt like they were just trying to have a twist again. And, okay, maybe it's the weakest one out of all of them, but ultimately...
I think the prison one maybe went on just slightly too long, but the concept wasn't.
Yeah, because I think the whole point there is the idea that he can just mask his world and not see what he wants to. That's the idea. If he's not losing time, he's warping reality to see what he wants to see. Like, it's kind of really setting up just how unreliable he is as a narrator.
Yeah, which has been, you know, something we've known since the start.
And it makes me think, you know, when he says hello friend to us, given that he said his father was his only friend, but now he had us as a friend, the audience.
Yes.
Like, you know, I do think it's going to... I don't necessarily think there's going to be like a big reveal about it, but I do think by the end of the show there'll be some sort of poignant way to interpret that. I don't think it's the last time he's going to... I think he's going to speak to us at least once more.
No, I agree, and it'd probably be like in the last episode now, though. There was a moment in this where Mr. Robot he's talking to Krista. It's when Mr. Robot, I think, is sat on the couch.
Yeah,
he's looking. I can't remember exactly what he's saying, but it looks like he's looking right at the camera because of the way he's sat, and it looks like he's talking to us. And again, because this show does that, you kind of it feels unnerving that he's looking at us, but he's not talking to us this time. He's talking to another character, and it kind of threw me weird in this show. It was interesting.
We have 6 episodes left. We have 6 episodes after this plot point.
It's amazing that in my head went, oh man, only 6, and then I went, Christ, there's still 6.
And I think that's why, like, I'm so convinced, and I'm like, why I know there can be 6 is because there has to be this arc. Like, Elliot has to also arc beyond this. This is not the end of his story. It can't be. He has to accept it. He has to, like, grow stronger. He has to, like, you know, come to terms with himself and Mr. Robot. He has to, you know, confront Darlene. He has to, like I say, become strong again so he can actually take on the Deus group. And I think thematically as well, because right now, like, his fight against the Dark Army and the Deus group does feel quite separate from his own story, his own personal story of why he is the way he is. And I don't necessarily need it to connect or, like, thematically tie in. I mean, I can just sort of take it as the reason why this Deus group had no idea what was coming. This idea that this broken individual could fight them in a way that they could never predict, right? There's something special just to that story in and of itself, the idea that someone can be that important for no matter where they come from. But I do almost wonder, like, I do think there will be some sort of thematic thing, maybe based on, you know, this device that Zanny's building or whatever.
I don't know what the thematic link is yet, but I'm sure there is one. I think it's too big, too important of this is what we're ending the show on, right? This fight. There's no way in this show there isn't a thematic link.
Actually, I'm just thinking about Price now. I'm thinking about how he was a father who wasn't in the picture. He did care about his daughter, and he couldn't protect her. So now he's trying to at least get some redemption or do something in her name after her death, which immediately makes him a better father than Elliot's dad. You know, it makes him better than him.
Kind of does.
You know, there's elements there to that. That's That's interesting.
Like I say, he wasn't there, but weirdly not in a malicious way, right?
I mean, that might be an extreme statement, but I think not being there is better than being there and molesting them.
Oh no, I agree.
Yeah.
But even before that, Price not being there, it never felt like a malicious thing. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, he left her and walked away. It wasn't really his choice at any point, and it never feels like it was just, Angela had her family, and Price was just like, you know what, okay, I'm just staying out of this.
Yeah.
In a weird way. Like, I'm not I don't know why I'm defending Price so hard. This is weird.
I don't know. It's the idea of going, just looking at parents in this show and like how they treat their kids. Whether it's parents in the flashbacks, parents in present day. How does Tyrell treat his kid? Whenever we've seen that, how does he care about his child? When he talks about his past and why he wants to be a good father. I don't remember that speech all that too well, but I feel like if I listen to it again now, I'm going to have an extra little bit of, hey, that's just how this kind of.
Yeah, you're going to feel differently. That's going to be such a weird thing. Rewatching this show from the start now is not hating Tyrell from the start.
Yeah, Tyrell's kind of an interesting character in that
because we kind of like Tyrell now.
He was a very broken character as well, who came out much more vicious than Elliot did. Even Vera, assuming that he's telling the truth about his past, he came out in a much darker place than Elliot did. So
I get I hate to come back to this, but the superhero thing. That's the difference between superheroes and supervillains, right? Is the villains also have a tragedy, but they take it in a different way to the heroes, right? The heroes overcome that and do right. I'm not going to let this happen to anyone else, and the villains lean into it and wallow in it and kind of lash out because of it. A lot of villains anyway, not obviously all of them, but a lot of them have that sympathetic origin which is often very similar in ways to the heroes.
Yeah, I can see Elliot dying at the end of this. I can see him getting some closure and dying in a sort of heroic moment. I think what I kind of need now, and it'll break my heart if it doesn't happen, is he needs to save Darlene. He needs to save Darlene.
Yeah, I think he will, in the sense that it's kind of what this has always been about. Hiding her in the cupboard, it was always about saving Darlene.
In fact, even just thinking about Darlene now with Dom, like the idea that Darlene ruined someone's life and she's seen someone else, like she's seen her father ruin her brother's life. And it's not in the same way, of course, but she did have sex with her, she did trick her with sex, and it wasn't coerced sex, but the idea it was used in some way.
Manipulative, yeah.
I think that weighs upon, when she looks guilty in that last episode when she's in the bathtub saying she's a shitty person and in whatever, and and that Dom is good, and she shouldn't do this because she's good. I think I now watch that scene differently, thinking about that now in that context where she's seen what her father did to Elliot, and maybe feels more guilty as a result of that because she's seen the effect of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is added.
God damn it! I love this episode.
Layers upon layers. And it's up there with some of the best in the show, for sure.
It's why I said at the start this might be my favorite episode, because not just because of the revelations, while obviously they're so important, and they recontextualize the show, but the acting, I think, in this episode is probably the best in the entire show from everyone across the board, all three of them.
Yeah, credit to Krista, because I think Krista as well.
It's a much more understated performance as compared to the other two.
But she's always been a solid supporting player, and I think it was nice for her to get this episode to really show off her skills, because you say three of them, and obviously I'm assuming you're meaning Vera, Mr. Robot, and Elliot. I'm going to throw in Krista as another
that's fair.
option here, because she's great here. And again, going back to the idea that she protects Elliot by killing Vera at the end, which is again something she's never done. This is not a person who's been a killer or ever had to be in combat like this, as far as we know anyway. And so it's a big step for her. But I think what I love about this, the idea that she's protecting Elliot, is she's doing the thing that perhaps his mother wasn't doing when he was a child.
Yeah.
Not that his mother should have literally stabbed, Edward in the back, but
saving him.
Yes, the idea that she's stepping in and being there for him in a way, and I think you go back to that previous episode where she was scared of him and she's like, "Oh, don't see me again," and your heart kind of breaks because and maybe the reason why Elliot was hurting him so bad is because this was reminding him of his mother being neglectful and not being there for him, and that he did feel that she was there for him, but now she won't be for different reasons. But this moment is her accepting, I need to be there for him. I need to be this rock in his life because he needs that. And she may still be scared of him next episode, but she still took this step. She still stepped forward and she still made sure that this guy couldn't take advantage of him. She made sure that one thing couldn't happen.
Yeah, personally, I don't think she's scared of him anymore. She's seen how vulnerable he is.
No, that's fair, yeah.
I think it's hard to be scared of him after that, for her perspective.
I think it's fair. And even just the way that he's always tried to save her throughout the entire episode, I think probably gives her a bit of confidence that he's never going to turn around and attack her or anything like that.
And also the fact that Mr. Robot defended her as well.
Yeah.
I think that's important because he was, the loose cannon, the unstable element that she was referring to as being afraid of, and I don't think she is after this.
Yeah, absolutely. This episode, I mean, I think we've went about 90 minutes so far on this.
Yeah, I kind of lost track because of some tech issues.
Yeah, some tech issues meant we recorded it in chunks, so we don't know exactly what the length is, but
long,
and and some of the best Mr. Robot episodes have done this to us, where we do go on these massive conversations talking about how new information affects old episodes or old scenes. This might be the first time since the end of season 1 where it completely recontextualizes the entire thing. We've had definitely a lot of things where it's made us reconsider things. I remember season 2 we were talking a lot about time travel because there was all those time clock hints and whatever else.
Yeah, and then we've had things of, well, maybe it's alternate dimensions now. So that's again recontextualize that element of things.
Yeah, we go on a bit of a rabbit hole talking about the weird theories and the science fiction possibilities, even though I don't necessarily believe it's ever going to go down the actual science fiction route. Although I do believe that thematically that conversation is still worth having because they're kind of playing with the ideas of that, even if they're not literally doing it.
This alternate version of reality where his father was his friend.
Yeah.
Like not and I mean that in a genuine way. Like that's kind of.
It's the one he's created in his head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's alternate reality.
That alternate reality, is that possibly real somewhere?
Well, damn. That's episode 7.
Just before we go, I actually checked the IMDb list.
Oh.
As of right now, it's actually number 2. It was Ozymandias from Breaking Bad that was presumably number 2 before. That's now number 3, and it's the Attack on Titan episode that's number 1. Those are the only 3 episodes as of right now on IMDb with a perfect 10. And then I just will say just the next couple because they made me laugh. 4 is another Attack on Titan episode. These are 9.9s now. Another Attack on Titan episodes. 5 is an episode of Chernobyl.
That makes sense. Which one?
Vichnia Pamyat.
No number?
No, sorry.
Okay, never mind then.
And then 6 cracked me up. It's an episode of Lazy Town.
I don't know what that is.
It's a kids show that was a little after your time. It started in 2002.
Okay.
I know it because of my youngest brother was kind of in that range, so I'm familiar with what it is. But I was like, why is that? The 6th best episode on IMDb. It kind of threw me for a loop. And then we're into Game of Thrones.
So sometimes I just it's just down to, is there enough people actually rating it? Because if only I mean there is a limit to how many people have to rate it for it to be considered for these lists. Because if only 10 people rate it, it doesn't count. But I have to imagine there's just over the threshold where enough people give it a 10, and then no one else is voting for it, so it just stays at 10.
Yeah, probably. It's interesting because IMDb here tells me how many votes these things have. So for context, Breaking Bad at number 3, that episode has 108,000 votes. That's
a lot for an episode of TV because usually single episodes of TV don't get a lot of votes.
Yeah. Next on this, out of those top 6, Chernobyl has 47,000. But we got a Mr. Robot as of right now. This again will probably change because it only has just under 3,000 right now.
Yeah,
so it might go down a little bit when people change that. When some people who don't love it as much maybe vote in the next week.
I mean that always happens, which is why it probably go down. Do you not remember Dark Knight was number 1 on IMDb 250 for a while before it kind of started to slide down a little bit?
Yeah,
it always happens. So that is episode 7 of Mr. Robot. No doubt there's more to even dissect and talk about that we didn't even touch upon. I'm sure
But
stuff
it's
will come
late.
up. You can feel free to obviously add in the comments what you think of the episode and your thoughts and theories. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. I will mention I did hear something that was in the ad for next time. I intentionally did not mention it because we don't talk about the ads for next time. And typically, I don't even like knowing what's in them. I just happen to accidentally stumble on something.
Yeah, I never watched them.
So for the sake of everyone else, if you're going to talk about what's in the next episode via the ads, make sure there's a spoiler warning for other people. Not everyone wants to know what's coming just because it was revealed in an ad. So do that. But you can let us know what you think of the episode in the comments, like and subscribe, ding the bell on YouTube, get the notifications. You can support us by rating the audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars, get us higher in their rankings. I don't expect to ever get to number 2 on Apple's podcasts, but get us as high as we can.
A man can dream.
Yes, you can support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. You can support us for as little as $1 per month, and you get some bonuses. You get outtakes, you get bonus shows of some of our movie podcasts and whatever else. But mostly you just get to feel warm and fuzzy that you're keeping all the content coming and supporting the show. But otherwise, that is us. Get us on Twitter at mail_fuzz for channel updates. Keep watching TV. Come back next week for Mr. Robot. And as far as plugging other stuff goes, you can check out me and Tara reviewing Watchmen. Next episode of that will be out in about a day or so's time after this, and you can check out me and Cara reviewing The Mandalorian, which is definitely not as meaty to talk about, unfortunately, but
it looks nice.
Well,
but and I say as I'm a huge Star Wars fan. You know that. I ain't got a shit on Mr. Robot.
Not just The Mandalorian, the entirety of Star Wars has nothing on Mr. Robot.
From an objective quality point of view, I probably agree.
Yes, you do.
But I still care more.
Oh no, I care more about Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot's better than all Star Wars. Beautiful.
But that's not the point. I look, you got it out of me. Just be happy, damn it.
All right.
That said, you haven't seen The World Between Worlds and Rebels, so
I'm not watching the silly kids cartoon. We can see you next time for more Mr. Robot. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?